I had faith. I just had faith in a fear-based system. It wasn't part of the path. My path was I went to the penitentiary when I was 22 years old. The last place I wanted to hang out was sober, was in a monastery with a group of guys that were in AA. I mean, I thought this was kind of surreal. The genius of 12-step spirituality isn't that it teaches you to surrender, but that it exhausts you in the effort to surrender. So you last surrendering and find yourself surrendered. I mean, that you could say that's how it works. And I mean, I have 11 years of knowing this thing's taking me to places I could have never got to. So I'm going to trust that. No reason not to.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts Michael L. and Lee M. On this show, we try to provide inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community. We are not aligned with any 12-step or recovery programs, but you may hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. Today is February 22nd. Very special guest today, Kurt Z., Redondo Beach, California. Kurt's been involved in the recovery community for over 30 years. We're delighted to have him on the show today. I hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, Lee. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing well. How are you this morning, Mike?
Oh, never better. It's a great day. What's going on today?
So today is February 22nd, and I am very excited to have Kurt Z with us today from Southern California. Right, Kurt?
Yes.
And
Fantastic.
Kurt's going to be sharing with us on the Daily Reflection guidance.
Outstanding. Well, Kurt, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Lee.
Thanks for coming.
So we start the show in the same way every day. We ask the guest to read the daily reflection for the day. Kurt, would you get us started?
I will. February 22nd. And guidance. This means a belief in a creator who is all-powerful, justice, and love. A God who intends for me a purpose, a meaning, and a destiny to grow, however haltingly, toward his own likeness and image. As Bill sees it, page 51. As I began to understand my own powerlessness and my dependence on God, as I understand him, I began to see that there is a life which, if I could have it, I would have chosen for myself from the very beginning. It is though the continuing work of the steps and the life and the fellowship that I have learned to see that there truly is a better way in which I am being guided. As I come to know more about God, I am able to trust his ways and his plans for the development of his character in me. Quickly or not so quickly, I grow towards his own image and likeness. Powerful.
It is a powerful reading. Tell me what you're thinking after you read that. What does it mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you what. I went over this and, where it says, as Bill sees it, if I can, let me read page 51. The coming of faith. In my own case, the foundation stone of freedom from fear is that of faith. A faith that, despite all worldly appearances to the contrary, causes me to believe that I live in a universe that makes sense. To me, this means a belief in a creator who is all-powerful justice, I just read this, and love, a God who intends for me purpose, meaning, and the destiny to grow, however little haltingly, toward his own likeness and image. Before coming of faith, I had lived as an alien in a cosmos that too often seemed both hostile and cruel. In it, there could be no inner security for me. When I was driven to my knees by alcohol, I was made ready to ask for the gift of faith, and all was changed. Never again, my pains and problems notwithstanding, would I experience my former desolation. I saw the universe to be lighted by God's love. I was I was alone no more. So I guess what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about a passage in a book by Richard Rohr. It's a 12-step book called Breathing Underwater. And there's a little, before the beginning of the book, there's a passage in there by Jose de Gasset, I think is his name. He was an 18th century poet. It said, the only genuine ideas are the ideas of the shipwrecked. All the rest is rhetoric posturing, and farce. So let me jump onto that. So when they talk about faith in here, let me describe what my idea of faith is. Faith is a modality of perception that gives reality to this great mystery. It's not belief. It's beyond belief. And it's beyond belief based on direct experience with grace or forgiveness, or we call God. It's based on a direct experience with that. And the being surrendered allowed an access to that paradigm, the parting of that veil. Now, in the big book, it's talked about many different ways. Like, I think one of the cool ways that Bill talked about, he said, the significance of Winchester Cathedral burst upon me. So it's like all of a sudden there's this ability to comprehend things I couldn't comprehend. Because before this surrendered experience, everything was being processed through a mind-bound, intellectual, rational perspective. So what I'm talking about here is I'm not really talking about it. I'm pointing towards it. Let's go back to the faith part where it talks about this. Unbeknownst to me, I had faith. I just had faith in a fear-based system. I had faith in it says in the big book, the God of reason. So I had faith in my thinking mind. That was my reality. The best way to think about this is my reality consisted of a circle, a small circle about the size of a baseball. And there was a bigger reality about the size of a basketball that I didn't have access to. The boundary of my reality encompassed me in this, we could call it the bondage of self. And it didn't matter how much or how many spiritual principles I used, it was still me using them. It just kept me in the boundary of self. So once that boundary was, you could almost say, I guess the best way to say it is dissipated, because you start to see that it's a false boundary. It's based on this mind-bound perception.
So where do you think that these boundaries are set? I mean, you talk about the rational versus the irrational, and so many things as we reach that pit of desperation, we cling to that rationality. Where do you think those boundaries are set? Is it nature? Is it nurture?
I think it's a narrative that it's based on trauma, old belief systems we were given, that whole gamut. I think Western society really is grounded in that. There's Adyashanti has a great thing. He says there's an existential crisis of unworthiness. And we know it in AA, we're irritable, restless, discontent. We can never be good enough. And if we're good enough, it cycles back and forth. So I think my view on it is, this is a lot of Western, it comes from a lot of Western perspective. In the East, they don't have that. They have their perspective is an innocent forgetfulness. Now listen to the difference. Innocent forgetfulness. See, I remember before I was drinking and using, I had a sense that something was missing. And everybody always told me there wasn't anything missing. But what I've come to find out was I was dead on the money. I was dead on the money way back before I ever learned this. There was an element of myself that I think grows now. In Al-Anon, they call it evolution and maturation towards wholeness. It's not that it's wrong. It's just the process of evolution and maturation towards wholeness. And I think that's where we're all going. We're all heading in that direction, regardless of, the places we stop on the way.
It sounds like you're saying that it's the brokenness and it's the feeling of being an alien and an outsider that actually busts through the boundary of the limitations that we've got and enables us to see that there's something more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't use that language of brokenness. I would use I like Rumi, the way Rumi says it. He says, the moaning of the old dog for his master is the secret cup. The moaning of the old dog for his master is the secret cup. In the some of the other traditions, they would say, this sense of lack was placed in me to draw me closer to the Creator.
The innocent forgetfulness.
Yeah, it was placed in me. So I could come to remember, so I could die before I died, so I could realize there is no death.
God brings us to recovery so that we can find God.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't pick this, obviously. You know, it wasn't part of the path. My path was, I went to the penitentiary when I was 22 years old. And the last place I wanted to hang out was sober, was in a monastery with a group of guys that were, in AA. I mean, I thought this was kind of surreal. So, I mean, when we're reading guidance, so the guidance, this is what I was looking at when I thought, it's so important to, when it says come to believe, well, I can read that as a skillful means of accomplishing something, or I can read it as a description of an experience that happens to me. Very different perspective. But I think both are inclusive. I had to start with the skillful means. That was part of the path. It's like when in one of the books, it's here. Let me just, if I can read it. It says, when surrender is a tactic, it's just another means of control, another effort to impose your will on your disease. Surrender is beyond your power. If it weren't, you would have no need for a higher power. The genius of 12-step spirituality isn't that it teaches you to surrender, but that it exhausts you in the effort to surrender. So you last surrendering, and find yourself surrendered. I mean, that you could say that's how it works. I mean, for most of us that have been here a little while, we start to see that. Rohr calls that the pattern of reality. My sponsor's Native American. He calls it their principal laws and values that are in motion, and you're a part of that.
But so I'm a little confused. I feel like, I'll speak for myself. I got to a point where there was no other path, and surrender was the only path forward. And what you're suggesting is that there was some skill in my selecting that. Is that what I'm to believe?
Well, for some people, that's one way to look at it. I mean, you could look at it like, and it's a perspective. I mean, it's not a right or wrong perspective. It's just some people would say, I did it. And then some people come to the realization, no, I didn't. It happened to me, not by me.
But you're also saying that for some people, doing it
is
necessary to get to the place where it happens to me.
Yeah, it's the paradox. There's nothing you can do about your problem, but only you can do it.
But there's more.
Yeah. My first sponsor said it like this. He said, look, you can sit in the corner and pray for ham and eggs all you want. He said, if you just sit there, you probably starve to death. But he said, if you sit in the corner and pray for ham and eggs and you turn around, get up, put one foot in the front of the other, you'll probably eat ham and eggs. And that just made it clear. That just was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's not like, well, I'm powerless. Why should I do anything? I mean, it's not that. And that's where we get into, that's why I think everybody, whatever works for people, because everybody's on a different place with this. But there is a reactive nature. And then there's also later becomes, you're not reactive, you're responsive. It's has a whole different energy behind it. And I think a lot of that comes from our practice of pausing when agitated or doubtful, um, directing our attention to others, prayer. I mean, it all changes. It changes from we're asking in prayer what we think God needs to give us, and then it changes to, well, wait, it's providing what I need if I keep close to it. And I don't know what I need, but it's providing it. So the prayer changes to thank you. It doesn't, I'm not dictating anymore. I'm receiving. And then reciprocate that goes out into the world. So I think there's a different degree. I wouldn't say levels, I would say degrees of it. So when they say guidance, I mean, my first guidance was I listened to my sponsor. I trusted his perspective.
How did you meet your sponsor?
The first one I heard speak in a meeting, the sponsor I have now, I met him at a monastery. He did a retreat up in Santa Barbara. And he was a Native American guy who'd worked for NASA and started a nonprofit. And, there was just something about him that was, it's that thing. It's that twinkle in the eyes. It's that presence. You can't quite put your finger on it. And I drank it 19 years. And he was one of the people that never moved from the way he treated me before, during, or after. He just stayed constant with the whole thing.
Can I ask you a little bit about that? When you drank it 19 years, what happened?
Well, I got sober in 1986. I got involved in AA. I got out of the penitentiary, got off parole. I started my own business. I met a girl in AA. We got married, had 2 kids, bought a house, started a business. Got everything that AA pretty much promises you'll get on the outside. And all of that was the distraction to the inside. I kind of lost touch with that. And went up to a buddy's house and hadn't thought about drinking in 19 years. And there was a glass of beer on the table. And there was that little thought that went, I think I'll have one of those. And it was just that subtle and that quick. And I couldn't get unhooked from that. I couldn't get released from that for about 1.5 years. And it was pretty crazy. All the people I'd sponsored in AA, and they were all now walking behind me when I went down the stairs to make sure I didn't fall and break my neck. So
it's humbling.
Yeah, it was. It was very, very necessary.
That was my next question. Do you feel like that was necessary?
Oh, most definitely. In fact, one of the questions my sponsor now called me, I was drinking in Newport Beach, and after my wife had given me divorce papers. And I lit them on fire, dropped them in the kitchen on the tile floor, and then I was going down to see an attorney in Newport Beach, and I was drinking, sitting in a little cove down there. He called me, and he didn't call very often, but when he did, it was very synchronistic. And, he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, 1986, were you serious when you took the 3rd step? I said, "Oh, I couldn't have been more serious." And it seemed like there was 5 minutes of silence. There was probably just 30 seconds or a minute. And he said, "I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to understand it." He said, "All of this is part of that decision." And I didn't understand it until I was given a prayer and got released. And I saw, oh my God, this is all I was trying to do was connect to wholeness. In Chuck C's book, Clancy wrote a great thing. He said, the conflicts of sober reality become untenable. And that's what happened. I was juggling 8 balls, where before I was just juggling 2. And I just didn't know how to, I did not know how to move in the spiritual world, in the physical world. And I thought I did. It was all based on reason, though. And so that surrender and that release was unbelievable, because, I mean, that's what I heard in my head. I was given a prayer to say for my wife because I was so angry at her. And the prayer was, please give Rhonda the very best that life has to offer. Please give her health, happiness, and prosperity. and please give her a peace and understanding she's never experienced before. And I said that prayer for 2 months, and right before my kids and her went up to the ranch, that prayer happened to me. That just was, I knew what it was. I'd had that experience in 1986. So I've stayed very close to that. I mean, I've stayed because that's what it says. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of this spiritual condition, which is an internal condition.
How do you maintain that spiritual condition today?
Well, I say yes to things like this. For one, I had a plumbing business for 30 years, and I closed that plumbing business and went into another business that, I have a little business called Two Trees Insight Guidance, and I work with other people. And so my whole life is geared towards giving back what I've been given. And I do some stuff for some old clients of mine, take care of some personal things for them that it's just it's our little plans and designs. We kind of like, wait, I thought if I could make enough money and build a business and do all these things, and I mean, it seems like that was the way to go. That's what everybody told me. But
We'll finish the thought. If you could do that, what?
well, I did it. I did it, and there was an emptiness still, and now there's not that emptiness. I mean, I really believe that that's the whole point of the 12 steps is to release you from the bondage of self, which is amplified by drug addiction and alcoholism. I mean, thank God I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. I mean, that was half of my problem. My problems were in between my ears, a little behind my eyes. That was the small circle of reality. Yeah. So that's not the case anymore.
So what does it look like today then? It sounds like you're not bound by what other people think you should be doing and what society says you should be doing. And so now what does it look like?
Let's just say I get up in the morning on the way to the office. It's a mile and a half from the house. I have a routine where I stop at the beach and I sit on the wall. That used to be where I would read something. I might read Jacob Needleman, Beyond Belief. I might read Rohr. I might read Shapiro. I might read something. And I would sit. And I come in the office. Now pretty much I stop at the beach, but I sit in the office here more than anything. And then I do what our book says. It's changed a lot because my instructions for it were changed. But part of that had to do with, like it says in the 11th step, we consider our plans for the day. My sponsor said, they're not talking about what you're going to do. I said, what do you mean they're not talking about it? He said, no. He said, they're talking about how you're going to be. And that's based on your corrective measures of the nightly review before. If I'm dismissive to you, how am I going to be today? So I don't need to so much plan the day. I mean, the day is pretty much a given thing. And it never goes the way you plan it. I mean, we all know that. I've sat down and written plans, and there's always something that's going to come in and interrupt between the third thing and the fourth thing and the sixth thing and the seventh thing. So I started to see when he kind of put a different twist on it. Oh, this is about moving. This is like the flow. There's a flow in it. And you start following the doors that open. And you can't do that from a fear-based system. You won't step into those doors. And those doors are only there for you. They're not there for anybody else. No one else can see them. So it takes an ability to trust and be grounded in this thing. It's like when I heard about this, it was just like, well, sure, I'll do it. Why? Well, because I was asked. So you follow the pointers. And it's worked really well for almost 11 years. And it's a totally different lifestyle. I mean, my life's changed completely. completely. I'm good friends with my ex-wife. I've been in a 4-year relationship with another woman who's in Al-Anon, and we met. It's very similar experiences. And I try to do this best I can with whatever's given to me. I think, one of the things I have on my doors, it says Two Trees Insight Guidance. It says committed to the wisdom traditions of many dialects of one language. We call it the language of the heart in the program, but I remember the first meeting I went to in 1979. I remember there was a guy talking, and I said, wow, I walked out of the meeting. I said, wow, that was a great meeting. Somebody said, what did he say? I said, I don't have a clue, but it was a great meeting. It was like it just bypassed my head. It went somewhere, and I didn't know what that somewhere was. So I've been investigating that for some time now.
It's a beautiful thing when you can be so open and trusting that you're willing to go in those doors. And I don't think a lot of people, in early sobriety at least, get to that place without some work.
Yeah.
What goes into that work? And tell me about how you got to where you're at today and how you developed that level of trust to just follow God's will.
Well, I came in 1979. I didn't get sober till 1986. So I drank 6 years in AA. And part of that was, of course, I didn't know what I was up against, meaning alcoholism. And when people would tell me just don't drink, and I'd go out in the car and drink, I'd think there was something wrong with me. I would process it through guilt and shame. And then when somebody came up to me and said, no, you're an alcoholic. That's why you go out in the car and drink. I was like, what? Like the information started to click. So what I did was I just followed the pointers, and one of the things that was really crucial in the beginning was I started paying attention to coincidences. There was so many different weird coincidences that were happening. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I remember being in a meeting and not having a Tuesday night meeting. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow night. I don't have a meeting for Tuesday. And right next to me were two guys talking. And I overheard the guy go, there's a really great Tuesday night meeting at this church over on Beach Nut. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I ended up going to that meeting, and it ended up being a home group for me while I was in Houston. So I was like starting to pay attention to these little God shots, we call them. And I started to trust those little things. And at first I thought I was nuts. I thought, oh my God, you're just losing it completely. But the deep surrender experience opens you up to a whole different dimension. So I think that's a really, that's what Bill says. I think one of the things he says, every one of them has gained access to and believes in. Oh, the belief comes after the access. See, I was trying to believe in something I didn't believe in. I was trying to believe in something I was supposed to believe in. And there wasn't any power in that. Yeah. So it's the basics. We all do the same thing. You go to meetings, you get a sponsor. You work the steps, best of your ability. You'll work them again, believe me. You'll work them again. And you try to, prayer and meditation. It says one of the things that's really profound is they say, look, this is how we improve our conscious contact. And they give you 2 modes, prayer and meditation. There are so many ways to improve your conscious contact with God. Walk in the redwoods. Stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Go to Aspen in the middle of December and look up at the sky at the galaxy. The Milky Way. There are 100 ways, Rumi again. There are 100 ways to kiss the ground. And we just there's only 2. No, there isn't. There's 2 ways to do this for a specific result. But there are a lot of ways to walk on the beach. Look at a beautiful painting. Fall in love. It's, this thing's it's not so small. We start to see it's much more expansive than we believed it to be.
You've made mention of several of my teachers.
Mm.
And I'm curious, what led you in the direction of the study? What made you, like, what came first, the study or the awareness, or both, or are they intertwined?
Well, what came first was that surrendered experience, I think. I mean, I was, I was a high school dropout. I didn't read my first book till I was 25 years old. And yeah, I mean, that was basically, I read my first book in prison. And it was a book by Leo Buscaglia, Living, Loving, and Learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time I was able to read something. Maybe it's because I was in a cell most of the day. But my problem was I could read and I couldn't remember what I'd read. I'd read a paragraph, I'd get to the next paragraph, and then I'd forget what I just read. Some people call it ADHD, some people call it, When I had that surrender experience, I was like, oh, this must be what they mean by God, obviously. This is what they're talking about, right? And I did what Bill did. I started reading varieties of religious experience. And I thought, my God, this is difficult. So I would just open it randomly to pages and I'd read maybe somebody's experience and I go, oh my God, that's what happened to me. So it gave proof and validity to this. Because I went to people in AA and I said, hey, this happened. They said, yeah. And I just keep coming back. There was not many people who could give credence to that. So, but, as we know, certain people are put in your path to start pointing you in the right direction. So I just follow that.
What do you tell the newcomer that's, clearly got this thing and they're struggling with it?
Well, I think the biggest problem for new people is they're not finished trying to manage and control and run the gamut on what they, I think that's all of our dilemmas. I don't think it's any different. I think the degree of it's different. But the newer person is like, I came in here thinking you guys were going to tell me how to control my drinking. That's what I heard. Now, I didn't know that this thing could be removed and there wouldn't be a need to control it. That was outside of the spectrum of my perception. I couldn't even think that up. Until I had a direct experience with it, I couldn't go there. So I would tell people, I work with some people at a treatment center in Culver City, and I do groups with them a couple times a week, and they're all right there. And most of it is they are so mind bound. They have so much rocket firing in the head. It's even hard for them to sit in a group because they're listening to this commentary that's totally, totally unnecessary for life. I mean, it's random. And until that slows down, so I think that's what's important for new people is like, take a breath. When you're agitated or doubtful, just take a breath. And that takes the focus off the thought, puts it on your breath. It allows a disruption of an energy, and it also allows a space for something to come in. So I would just say, look, little steps. You're not going to take big steps. We're going to take little bitty steps. You go to meetings, you stay connected. It's real difficult for people now, especially the last year. The new people are having a tremendous time. And so are a lot of the old people. There's a lot of people with time that have emotional sobrieties hasn't really been accessed. It's another phase in the development of, it's stage specific. It's like we have to get to a point where we don't function from that, and everything coming at us is functioning from that. So it's just kind of, I hate to keep quoting, but it's like your thought life's put on a higher plane. It's like you start to see a bigger picture. It's like you're looking at high def color now rather than black and white. So, use metaphors like that to help the newer people. But the basics are the basics. Get a sponsor, go to meetings, connect to a fellowship of people who are in the same boat you're in. Because that's all part of it. Getting connected, making new friends. It's really big. Yeah, really big.
You ever get wrapped around the axle today?
Not too often. Yeah. Yeah, my girlfriend goes, I can't believe you were so angry before. She just cannot get that, I said, oh my God, you have no idea. I was a maniac because I was angry. I was angry at everything. And I could never put my finger on why I was angry. And I can do it today. It's very clear to me. I mean, but the problem's clear from the solution. The problem's not clear from the problem. And the reason I was angry is because I was separated. I did not know that I was separated from this thing that was right in front of me, closer to me than my breath. And when I gained access to that, and I don't mean by effort or by skillful means, the best way to say it is when I was allowed access to that, it became self-evident why I was angry. It was self-evident. So that's my big mantra is daily reprieve for everybody. Daily reprieve contingent. Hey, I don't have to worry about next week. What I got to worry about is I got a meeting at 7:00 tonight, and we're doing this right now, and I'm not, this is it. This is here. It'll unfold tomorrow, and new things will come in that I didn't know were coming in. It's funny, right before this meeting, a guy called me and said, will you talk in London on the daily reflections? And I said, oh, too funny. I said, I'm fixing to do something on that. I just got a kick out of it. I mean, I just sit laughing in here by myself, So,
It's like you have an attitude of adventure, just waiting to see what's coming. What I'm hearing anyway is without an attachment to the outcomes of anything, really. Let's just see how it unfolds.
Yeah. Well, I used to wake up, oh my God, what's going to happen today? And now I say the same thing, but it's a whole different viewpoint. Yeah. And I mean, I have 11 years of knowing this thing's taking me to places I could have never got to. So I'm going to trust that. No reason not to.
Which is where the faith comes in.
Yeah.
Just by experiencing it, always, I guess, being okay.
Well, that's why I think it's so, when I say, it's a modality of perception that gives reality to this great mystery. It's like you get to see behind the curtain. I mean, isn't that what Wizard of Oz was about, right? And fear, right? A little animal pulled the curtain back, and what they thought was this big monster was nothing but a little old man pulling levers. I mean, that's metaphorically just dead on the money. That's what false evidence appears real, and I had faith in it.
Well, Kurt, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I want to thank you for spending time with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience?
No, I just, I really enjoyed talking with you guys. This is very enriching. I mean, I think this is the benefit of what we do, what you're doing with the podcast. I think it's, reaching people that way. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you for being a part of it. Such a blessing. And it's just such a blessing to get to hear everyone's stories on here and get to sit with you in the space, How cool is that?
Front seat at the best concert in the world every day.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell them. This is hard work. This is service. Kurt, God bless. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much to Kurt for joining us today. Thanks to you for listening. If you want to find out more about the Daily Reflection podcast, you can join us online at Facebook, facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. We've also got a blog where we write about recovery. That's at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. We're always on Twitter @DailyReflector. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.